This is Richard Von Glahn. I'm the Policy Director with Missouri Jobs with Justice. Thank you to everyone for joining here. This is our 5th installment of the Missouri Jobs with Justice Voter Action sort of response to the COVID-19 pandemic webinar series. We've been doing this about every 2 weeks, which by my math means we're either in week 10 or week 12 of this, although sometimes it feels much longer. Our last webinar was about what we needed to do in the final week of the legislative session. And today we are going to discuss the results of our efforts and what we plan to do in the next few months. A few notes and tips about the webinar and using Zoom before we get started. It looks like a lot of you are veterans of this. We're all getting better at it. But with so many people on the call, people are going to be on mute, and you're only going to see the speakers by video. If you are on a computer, please use the Q&A button at the bottom to ask questions about the presentation. That helps make sure that we see them. We will try to answer some as we go along, and then at the end, we will open it up to everyone to be able to ask questions and answer anything that we miss. We encourage you to use the chat function to make any comments or flag any issues as we go along here. People are doing a great job of going ahead and using it just to introduce yourself, give us a sense of community of where everyone is from. So please continue to do that. We'll have several staff members that are also in the chat who can help resolve any issues as we go along. We're going to provide some links to action steps in an email after this webinar is complete. So if you miss anything as we're going, don't worry about it. You will get some follow-up. There will also always be the contact info for all of our local organizers at the end of the call if you've got any follow-up questions or concerns for them. Jobs with Justice Voter Action is a coalition of labor, community, faith, and student groups, as well as individual activists who care about building an economy and democracy that work for all of us. That is part of what we're going to focus on today when we hear about the legislative recap. We are also part of a coalition called the Missouri Organizing and Voter Engagement Collaborative. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce part of the mission statement of that organization before we get started today. We are a coalition of grassroots organizations that believe in the innate dignity, worth, and power of all people. We work to support the leadership of historically oppressed people and oppose dehumanizing narratives of white supremacy and domination. We work together on issues of education, economics, criminal justice, health, labor, and political engagement. We are dedicated to creating a new narrative of mutual thriving and modeling the just world we want to create both within and between our organizations. Today, we are excited to hear from 5 leaders of our coalition: John Stratton, the rector at Trinity Episcopal Church and faith co-chair of the St. Louis leadership team; Stephen Weber from the Missouri AFL-CIO; Khadijah Wilson from the Organization for Black Struggle; Cheryl Hibbler, St. Charles activist and a member of the 2010 House Redistricting Commission; and once again, Denise Lieberman from our Workers' Rights Board. We are excited about the expertise that they are all going to bring from our efforts here during the legislative session. So we are going to start with some of the attacks that working people faced coming from Jefferson City. And I am going to turn it over first to John Stratton to begin that discussion. John, you should be unmuted.
Hello, everyone. Like Richard said, my name is Father John Stratton. I am the pastor at Trinity Church in the Central West End, and also a member of the leadership team for St. Louis Jobs with Justice. So I imagine that we all came into the struggle for a living wage for different reasons. But for me, it was because of my commitment to following the way of love as demonstrated by Jesus Christ. And let me tell you, paying folks $7.85 an hour when your business makes millions of dollars in profit, that ain't love. That's greed, that's shameful, and that's just plain wrong. That was the minimum wage in Missouri back in 2018, but we changed that. Workers, community members, and religious leaders of all faiths came together and said, that ain't right. That ain't love, and this ain't the way the world has to be. And so we passed Proposition B with an overwhelming majority because the people of Missouri agreed that poverty wages just ain't right. Now, we haven't made it all the way. We still need a $15 an hour minimum wage, but we have moved Missouri in the right direction. And then the folks in the state legislature tried to undermine the will of the people. They tried to undermine the love of the people by exempting religious organizations from the democratically agreed upon minimum wage. Can you believe that? They wanted to exempt religious institutions. Some of these institutions bore the name and continue to bear the name of Jesus. And they wanted to exempt them from following the law of love that Jesus preached. So in the words of the great Paul Robeson, we call that religion? No, no. That's a scandal. If you preach the religion of love thy neighbor, you ain't exempt from the law of love. If you follow the worker from Galilee, you ain't exempt from the law of love. If the golden rule is your creed, then you ain't exempt from the law of love. So I don't know what religious leaders were asking for this exemption. But I do know a whole lot who didn't much care for it. And we organized and we defeated it. And we will keep on fighting any exemptions to the law of love. And we will win because I believe that ultimately love wins. So I'm proud to be part of this coalition. I'm proud of the work that we've done. And we will, again, keep working for fighting and working for working families and people here in Missouri. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, John. And the bill that we were working on to defeat here, House Bill 1559, that as John mentioned, we had over 50 clergy testify in opposition to. No one actually had the courage to testify in support, but we showed up and we spoke out against it. But during the process, it actually got amended and the bill became even worse. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Weber with the AFL-CIO to talk a little bit about unemployment insurance and some important victories we won, but then also what also was proposed in this bill that we had to make sure we defeated. Stephen?
Thanks, Richard. So my name is Stephen Weber. I'm at the Missouri AFL-CIO, and I will not be, I think, as eloquent as John was, but I'll be a little bit nuts and bolts here on unemployment insurance. So anybody who's dealt with unemployment insurance knows it's an incredibly complicated system, probably intentionally incredibly complicated. And I'm going to draw actually sort of an analogy to Medicaid in that when you get federal dollars for enhanced unemployment insurance, there are some federal guidelines that you have to follow, but states have a lot of freedom in how to implement those guidelines. And much like in Medicaid, the state of Missouri often takes the most draconian approach to do the least to qualify for any sort of federal funding and actually provide as few services as possible to our citizens. So when this enhanced funding came down from the federal government, we as sort of a coalition, as a community, set our sights on two specific things that the state of Missouri and the governor of Missouri had discretion to do, that we were trying to get them to accomplish to make things better for Missouri citizens. The first is we wanted a waiver of the 1 week waiting period, right? If a person has lost their job, the whole idea is that with unemployment insurance is that they don't miss a payment on their rent, they don't lose their home, the family doesn't go hungry. It doesn't make sense to say, hey, we know that you qualify, but you're going to have to suffer through this week of pain first before you get some sort of stability. So we wanted to try to get a waiver of that. The second piece was that traditionally under the Missouri Unemployment Insurance Program, there was a requirement that you're actively seeking work, and you have to show proof that you're actively seeking work. Now, when millions of people across the country are losing their jobs actively, it's obviously incredibly difficult when you lose your job to get another one. But not only that, there's a public policy reason that we don't want people actively going around during a pandemic trying to interact with other people. We want them to be safe, to be socially distanced. And so there's a really strong public policy reason besides the moral reason for why we should be waiving the work-seeking requirement during this coronavirus pandemic. And so Jobs with Justice actually really sort of led the coalition. It was joined by the Missouri AFL-CIO and some other groups. And we just did, a communication strategy to try to get press on the issue. We did petitions, we patched through calls. And because of the pressure we were able to create, we were actually successful in getting the governor to waive the 1 week waiting period and to temporarily waive the job-seeking requirement for unemployment insurance recipients. So that's a good thing that we've actually done. And so often it's so difficult to accomplish positive change sometimes in the state of Missouri. So we wanted to thank everybody for the work they did on that and celebrate those wins. Unfortunately, right after that happened, as Richard alluded to, House Bill 1559, which started out as the attack on the minimum wage, was then amended to attack the unemployment insurance system. And essentially, and I have to give it to some of our opponents, they're incredibly creative. What they decided that during this pandemic, what they would try to do would be to make a change which would reduce the benefits that workers would receive, not only now, but really forever. They tried to take it so if a worker had earned sick days, had earned vacation time as through their labor as part of the agreement, if they had delayed taking those things and they had accumulated sick days, if when they lost their job, they were paid out for those sick days, the money from their sick days would actually be counted against the unemployment benefits that they were entitled to under the state of Missouri. And so just incredibly cynical time to go after that and to try to reduce the benefits that workers would be entitled to and would have earned under unemployment insurance. And so a bad bill got worse. And that became one of the top priorities for the AFL-CIO. Mary Berry, who's sort of leads our lobbying team in Jefferson City, and Kenny Menges and Richard Craighead and everybody else sort of in the labor community really focused and rallied. And the Democratic caucus was incredibly helpful, and they stood up against it, and we were able to successfully stop it. So we not only made the positive changes on the front end, we were able to stop the cynical attacks against minimum wage and unemployment insurance. And as a result of that, the minimum wage is still going to be is protected as we pass through Prop B, and it's going to be going up to $10.30 an hour soon. And that's an incredibly big win for everybody. So when we're going through this, and there's so much obviously just gut-wrenching problems and injustice in the world, we wanted to take a moment and thank everybody for the work they've done and say that there's actually concrete things that are better and are getting better in Missouri because of the work that everybody on this Zoom call and throughout the community has done. So that's the update on unemployment insurance. Thanks, Richard.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And, we really appreciate the leadership that, both John as a faith co-chair and Stephen from the AFL-CIO, and helping protect workers from these attacks. And it's very exciting to hear that once again on January 1, all workers, as John mentioned, that were covered by Proposition B that we passed in 2018, all of those workers will once again see a pay raise going up to $10.30 in January 1 of 2021. So next, we are going to somewhat switch gears and actually focus on some of the attacks that not just came on workers, but also on our democracy and our democratic processes. To start, I'm going to ask Khadijah Wilson from the Organization for Black Struggle to discuss the multitude of attacks we once again faced on the initiative petition process and what we did in response and the results of that. So Khadijah, you should be unmuted.
All right. So yes, there were over 20 bills filed to attack this initiative process, right? That's the most in this country. So one of the few attacks were adding roadblocks to the qualification process, raising numbers to the petition signatures, restricting who can petition, and making it harder during the signature verification piece, plus more. Organization for Black Struggle and Job with Justice helped lead the first ever lobby day on this issue, meeting with Republicans and Democrats to discuss the importance of defeating this right for Missourians. I was one of many to be able to take a trip down to Jeff City to speak to our politicians like Representative Tommy Pearson Jr., who seemed to understand our concern and establish his support to keep the process the same. It is important that politicians listen to what citizens are saying and support the right for us to directly participate in our democracy. Missouri eligible voters can make decisions about policies that truly impact their daily lives and create actual change, being that they live in these communities. Bad proposals on the initiative process reform were alive until the very end. In fact, the final negotiation on this did not end until 3 a.m., the last day of the session. But our allies stood firm in the initiative process. Changes were not part of the final passage. This is a huge victory. Thank you for all your efforts. Our champions that were a part of the negotiation, including Senator Sifton, Representative Price, and Representative Wendell. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Khadijah. And this was the first year that we actually organized the specific lobby day to defend the initiative petition process. It sometimes maybe seems like a wonky or an academic thing to get into the details, but it's critically important. You see the photo there of Khadijah and some OBS activists meeting with Representative Tommy Pearson Jr. It's critically important that politicians hear from the people, the practitioners of the initiative petition process, about why it is so critical and to defend it from attacks. And Missouri had, I think as Khadijah said, over 20 bills filed to attack this process. So it is wonderful that we were able to defeat all of those. Next, we are going to turn it over to Cheryl Hibbler. Cheryl is a activist with us in St. Charles, was a leader on the Clean Missouri campaign, and is a veteran of the redistricting process from her service on the House Redistricting Commission in 2010. Unless you have been hiding from the news, you're probably aware that the legislature did pass Senate Joint Resolution 38, a proposed constitutional amendment to undermine Clean Missouri. This proposal was actually just signed by the Speaker of the House today and sent to the Secretary of State. So we expect that we are going to see it on the November ballot as November 3, as Amendment 3, that we will vote on, I believe, November 4th. Cheryl, can you share some of what exactly SJR 38 does?
Well, what SJR 38 does is take us back, if Amendment 3 is passed, take us back to where we were the last time we had redistricting when I was on the commission. Not only that, but even farther back. If you think that this amendment is a incumbent protection program, I mean, if you think the other one was that we changed the way we used to do it, this one with Amendment 3 is like a protection, an incumbency protection plan on steroids. They're going to be able to do even more that is partisan, even more that will divide this so-called bipartisan, yes, bipartisan, but deeply and deeply aggressively partisan commission, and take away any chance for us to get back to what we should be for competitive districts in Missouri. Should any political party with 36 to 40% of the vote on anything be able to pack the districts and take a huge extreme majority as they have here in Missouri? That's what's happened over the last 10 years and even previously. The way the commissions worked previously under the original law was just not working over the last 4 decades. Either a judge or a commission that was questioned all the time or fought legally in court after the redistricting is what happened. It surely did signify that we needed a better way. The other thing that this new Dirty Missouri, SG 38 or Amendment 3, whatever we're going to call it, does is it has a section in it which presents anyone from within a district that has been packed, another synonym for gerrymandered, will have no ability at all to sue or to take it to court because of the way they've been packed into certain districts and have no chance to make a difference in how the votes are turn out. This is something that truly will set us back for 10 years into another path down the gerrymandered extreme majority that we've had to deal with most recently. And the most egregious thing about it is the fact that we told them, we Missourians, in a Democratic policy called Initiative Petition, have told them this is what we wanted, but yet still they're going to go down that path. Even one of their own made some comments on the time it came up for a vote in the Senate committee. And we're going to hear a word from him as to what one of their own, a Republican from the Lake of the Ozarks area, Rocky Miller. And we have a video of the day that this went through the Senate hearing.
I now move that Senate substitute for number 3, Senate Joint Resolution 38 be voted do pass. I have some comments on this. So this is quote unquote the cleaner Missouri. I'm putting it up for a vote today and I will vote in favor of it. There's been a lot of talk on it. I've been told by the state GOP that there are errors or corrections that need to be made on this. That would then require it to go back over to the Senate, which I think at this late hour may be a death sentence. So I would hope that if people feel strongly on this bill, that they would either not allow it to come forward or come forward as is. That being the case, here's my prediction on this. This is going to go down in flames if it makes it to the ballot. Flames. This will not pass at all. This will be as bad as right to work. This will be 3 strikes in a row against the GOP. So, if they want 3 strikes in a row, pass this. We'll see how it goes.
So there you have it. I think that they're going to run into more trouble with trying to convince voters that they were too stupid to understand what they voted on. And besides that, you know, what else, will we ever trust them again?
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. And I think it's important to note that, Representative Miller even pointed out that the bill as it was written had errors, had corrections in it, and they didn't amend the bill to fix any errors or any corrections. They simply passed it as it was. And so we know that now this will be Amendment 3. It should be on the November ballot. And so in order to make Representative Miller's prediction come true, that this go down in flames, that this be as bad as right to work, and that it be strike 3 for a legislature that refuses to listen, there is an obvious key ingredient to that. How do we vote safely during a pandemic? Luckily, our Worker Rights Board member, Denise Lieberman, is always on the case when it comes to voting rights. And she is here with us again today to provide us on some key updates on what transpired during the legislative session, some of the final negotiations and final bills that were passed, and what we have to expect coming forward. Denise, you should be unmuted. What can you tell us about voting?
Hi, thanks, Richard. Thanks, everybody. This is Denise Lieberman. I'm the coordinator of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, which is a nonpartisan statewide network of about 50 organizations that work to protect the right to vote, including many on this call, like Jobs with Justice. And I'm a proud member of the Worker Rights Board here in St. Louis of Jobs with Justice. And, we know that when people can exercise their right to vote, the people win. And democracy wins. And that's precisely the reason that we have seen so many attacks on our ability to access that basic fundamental right. And the video that you just saw lays that bare, exactly why lawmakers have dedicated so much time and effort to try and make it harder to vote. And so we have been in the legislature this year fighting off continued attacks on the right to vote. And I'm glad to say that we were successful in battling down some of the worst attacks and in getting some modest reforms passed that will ensure that voters can safely cast a ballot in Missouri this year. Because one thing we know to be true is that voters should not have to choose between their safety and exercising their fundamental right to vote. We can vote safely during this pandemic, as long as people have the ability to safely cast a ballot away from the crowds at polling places. And that's precisely the recommendation that the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition and all of our allies and partners, and in fact, 60% of Americans across the country have said that people should be able to vote by mail this year. Unfortunately, Missouri's antiquated voting rules make that difficult. You see, 34 states plus the District of Columbia already allow any voter to vote by mail without providing a reason. If Missouri was among those states that allowed no excuse absentee voting, we could have been directing our efforts elsewhere. But instead, Missouri is in the minority of states that require voters to list one of a limited number of excuses if they want to skip the polling place on election day. And unfortunately, our statewide leaders, including our state's chief elections official, the Secretary of State, refused to provide guidance that those excuses would allow people who were abiding by CDC recommendations, who were practicing social distancing, who want to stay home to avoid spreading or contracting this virus at a crowded polling place, to be able to vote absentee. And look, we need only look so far as the debacle in Wisconsin during the April elections to understand why that is so critically important. The nation watched as people stood in lines wrapped around the blocks, crowded into polling places that have been consolidated. Milwaukee alone, they consolidated 180 polling places down to 5. And now we're seeing the tragic results with numerous new cases. And so we have been calling to ensure that all Missouri voters can vote by mail. Luckily, in the final, literally the final minutes, in the last hour of the legislative session, Missouri lawmakers passed a bill, Senate Bill 631, that provides some modest mechanisms to allow Missouri voters to vote by mail this year. It's not perfect, and I'm going to tell you why, but we were successful in getting out some of the worst parts of this legislation. First, here's what it does. It does two things. It adds another reason that you can vote absentee. Currently in Missouri, you can vote absentee if you expect to be confined due to illness. We're currently in court to ask the Missouri Supreme Court to confirm that anyone who's practicing social distancing can use that. But Missouri legislature passed another excuse as well. If you have or are in a high risk group for contracting COVID-19, you can also vote absentee without a notary. And that includes anyone over age of 65, anyone who's immunocompromised, heart condition, liver condition, kidney disease, etc. In addition, it also allows any voter to vote a mail-in ballot, but those ballots will need to be notarized. And so that's part of the reason that we are still in court, because we know that if it's not safe for voters to leave their homes and congregate at crowded polling places to cast a ballot, it also compromises people's safety to leave their homes and have to find a notary, sometimes at cost to them. However, this bill is much better than what it started out to be, because it did not originally allow for any voter to cast a ballot by mail. And the bill originally included onerous provisions on the initiative petition process, as Khadija referenced earlier, that were taken out. And it included a strict photo ID requirement that also did not make it into the final bill. And so at the end of the day, this bill is a win for Missouri voters, because it will allow anyone to vote by mail in the state of Missouri. If you are confined, ill, or at risk for COVID, no notary is required. And currently, any other voter can vote by mail, but a notary will be required. For elections coming up on June 2nd, please note the Election Protection Hotline will be live. We will have our attorneys standing by. You can call now, even if you have any questions. But don't forget, Election Day, 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-687-8683. We will have election protection attorneys standing by to answer any questions about your right to vote.
Wonderful. Thank you, Denise. Knowing how to vote safely is going to be critically important as we go through this fall, both the, well, frankly, elections next week, coming up again in August, and then again in November. So we appreciate your steadfast work and dedication. And if people don't know the number, 866-OUR-VOTE, remember it. It's critically important. It can really make a difference for voters on Election Day. Finally, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Jameson Wells, the Kansas City organizer, who can give us some updates with all of this work and all of this information onto what are the things that we need to do next, as well as a exciting update around Medicaid that's not actually from the legislative process, but an update on the timeline there. So Jameson, you should be unmuted.
Hello all. Thanks everyone who's already gone. And yeah, kind of as Richard said, as you can see on the screen there, there's some different links. So we're asking folks as individuals or along with your organization to endorse a Vote No on Dirty Mo pledge. So that's Amendment 3. Voting yes on Medicaid expansion, which I'll speak more about here in a moment. Signing up to volunteer, which is vitally important. And then of course, donating, because to do this work, we do need that funding from folks to be able to keep doing it. So kind of what I'm excited about right now, as I'm asking folks to volunteer, is that, you know, a lot of the work we just went over was us trying to move the legislature, the governor, secretary of state to do the right thing. And we were successful in a lot of ways, but we still see that they will say something will go down in flames as they vote yes on it. So I'm excited that in roughly 70 days, we don't really have to be horribly concerned with their votes. It's actually about our ability to turn out. So now we're in a situation where if we do what we need to do, we win. About 70 days from now, all the signatures we collected on Medicaid, the decade we've been doing advocating for it, we win. 70 days. So what we're inviting folks into volunteering, every Tuesday we're going to have phone banks, 5:30 to 7:30. Every Thursday, I believe it's 11 to 1, will be phone banking. There will be more opportunities, so definitely keep that volunteer link handy, but we just want to invite people into this work, especially leading up to that August 3rd election. 70 days, if we volunteer, if we do what we know we can do, we can win. And that is actually super exciting coming off of this work. Like we just get to win now, and that's awesome to know. So please use that link. We'll share them in the chat here shortly. Reach out to the local organizers like myself. We'll be sharing our contact info. But I mean, this is the time. Like the work you put in for a decade, the work you put in gathering, the work you put in advocating, like it is time to claim the victory of your work. Let's get to it.
Thank you, Jameson. Yeah, really appreciate that. I mean, I know many of the people that I see, on this call are people that I've seen, marching together with us in the halls of Jefferson City, fighting for Medicaid expansion for over a decade. And it is very exciting to know that in, I believe, 71 days, we get the opportunity to claim that victory and all of that work and pass Medicaid expansion, pass Amendment 2 that will be on the August ballot. So there are going to be a lot of things that continue to develop. There's going to be a lot of things that really move very quickly. And so I want to encourage people to please follow us on Facebook, Missouri Jobs with Justice, on Twitter @MOJ, @MWJ, and on Instagram @Missouri Jobs with Justice. There are lots of things moving right now. There's lots of discussions about the governor's action yesterday to just move Medicaid to the August ballot. There are some rumor and speculations that the governor might try to move Amendment 3, Dirty Missouri, there. He has not currently. Amendment 3, Dirty Missouri, is currently on the November ballot, but as things are updated, please do follow our social media. That is a great way to stay up to date. Crystal does a great job on putting information out there and keeping everyone informed and knowing what we need to know. We will also be sharing, as we develop, some graphics on what are your rights around voting that Denise provided, and there will be updates on that as there is still a pending court case. So I really encourage people to follow us there and stay absolutely up to date. We will also, I believe, still continue to plan to do some of these webinars going forward and provide updates from these campaigns. Thank you to all of the leaders who gave updates on our campaigns and, frankly, our incredible victories that we've had. I am truly inspired to know that we took a step forward on voting rights. We defended our petition, our initiative petition process. Missouri workers will see another raise because of our efforts come January 1. And we are going to get the opportunity finally, after so many years, to pass Medicaid expansion coming up this August, and allow Representative Miller's prediction of gerrymandering going down in flames in November. We have a lot to be proud of. It's because of the tremendous leaders and activists that we have that have made it all happen. So we appreciate you. Please keep an eye out with an email for links to action steps. Be sure to volunteer, claim our victory, and reach out with any questions if you have any. I will make sure that we give time for any questions to go into the Q&A box. And otherwise, I hope everyone can stay safe and healthy. Thank you for joining, and we'll see what questions we have.
Hey, Richard. We've got a question from Ed Finkelstein. What's the deadline for the governor to make a decision on whether clean will be on August or November?
So technically, he is supposed to make a decision yesterday, which is when he decided to put Medicaid on the August ballot. Now, the Dirty Missouri Amendment 3 does not have a fiscal note. Perhaps one of the errors that Representative Miller was talking about was that the legislature did not do a fiscal note on their own bill. That is required. So that is going to have to go to the auditor, we believe, to do that. But we believe the deadline has passed for the governor to make an announcement. But the statute on this is frankly not clear. We know that absentee voting for August begins, correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, but I believe June 23rd. So it certainly needs to be by then. So we're keeping an eye on this, Ed, but we expect and believe this should be on November.
Okay, then I've got, this question is designed for Stephen. Do you know when the enhanced unemployment benefits will end, the no job search and the extra $600?
So there's two different processes, right? The extra $600 is a federal program, and then no job search is something that the governor has waived. I don't off the top of my head know how many weeks it'll go for. I will, so if somebody else knows, feel free to chime in. What happened in the last recession was they continually extended the number of unemployment weeks that you're eligible for. It goes back to each state having some control over their own program. In Missouri, we have made it so our workers are eligible for significantly fewer weeks at significantly lower pay than most other states. But when the enhanced federal benefits, that period often gets extended. So in 2008, it was extended for up to a year. You could be on unemployment insurance benefits. I think what will happen is that will continually get extended multiple times. But I don't know off the top of my head the number of weeks it is right now. So if somebody else knows, feel free to add that.
Yeah, I think the enhanced benefits from the federal government are currently set to expire at the end of July. But as Stephen mentioned, there's another proposal, the HEROES Act in Congress, that seeks to extend that. You could call Senator Blunt or Senator Hawley and ask them to vote for that and to support that. But the current program is set to expire at the end of July, the extra weekly payment. So I see there's some questions from Izzy and from Fran about talking points on Medicaid and issues with the change to the August ballot. I'm going to see if I can put my colleague Crystal Brigman Mahaney, who's our comms expert, on the spot and see if she has any talking points she wants to share from that. Otherwise, I'll feel free to kick it back to me, Crystal.
Sorry, I was having technical issues. I'm over here trying to type away in the chat. So one, to talk about the change to the August ballot. So those who were with us in 2018, whenever we defeated so-called right to work, as soon as that got moved to the August ballot and it was called Prop A, we switched everything to vote no on Prop A, especially because we've got 70 or so days. This is a huge opportunity that after 10 or more years of working to expand healthcare to the more than 230,000 like Missourians and hard workers, et cetera, that we get to exercise our power and send this message and vote on that even sooner. And the way that we're going to do that is through volunteering and saying, vote yes on Amendment 2 on August 4th. I'm sure we or the campaign will figure out some better slogans than that, but we're definitely like, that's going to be one of the most important things that we can do. And I believe that the campaign Healthcare for Missouri, but also like we, Missouri Jobless Justice Voter Action, will be working on like our talking points and things that we can send you, like set up on our website. And if there's any other specific questions, I will put my information in the chat and anyone can follow up with me. Hopefully that.
I think it will be critically important. I see a comment in the chat that people know that this is on the ballot on August 4th. I think there's a lot of speculation that maybe the governor is trying to do this to be a lower turnout election in hopes that people don't know. But unfortunately, I think he underestimates the ability of our coalition and others to have a broad outreach program. And as Jameson mentioned, you can begin phone banking with us on this as early as next Tuesday to help spread the word. Because we know if Missourians know, and if they have the advice that they need from Denise on how to vote safely, that we can go out and we can claim our victory here. I see a question from Karen on talking points on Dirty Missouri Amendment 3. We are still developing some things as we go through some points there. So, you know, stay up to date with our Facebook page and other things. There are a lot of provisions of Amendment 3 that are really, really bad. Whether it is part of what Cheryl mentioned, that it specifically gives partisan appointees the right to gerrymander in our state constitution, whether it is, as she mentioned, it forbids citizens from having the right to sue if they are gerrymandered and packed into an unfair district, whether it is the fact that it undermines 150 years of the Missouri state constitution that counts total population when doing the reapportionment process, and would instead no longer count immigrants or children. There is a lot to dislike about Dirty Missouri, Amendment 3, and we will be sure to be providing more of that information, and we'll probably dedicate a future webinar exclusively to that. Any other questions or comments from anybody? I don't see any other in the Q&A box. So with none, we appreciate everyone's efforts. We hope you celebrate the power that you exercised here over these last 3 months and the great victories that we actually have coming out of an admittedly difficult legislature, and the victories that are to come this fall. Please keep in touch and help us make it so. Thank you all.